Let's take a look at Chris's top 20 starting pitchers for next season on Fantasy Baseball Today in 5. Welcome into FBT in 5 on Saturday, November 30th. I am Frank Stampfl, joined by Chris Towers, and let's take a look at your early top 20 starting pitchers for next season. We'll go in groups of 5, and your top 5 is Tarik Skubal, Zach Wheeler, Paul Skeens, Corbin Burnes, and Logan Gilbert. Something we've talked a lot about, Chris, is there's a pretty clear consensus top 3 starting pitchers, and then it opens up at SP4. You have Corbin Burnes ranked as your SP4. Does that mean you are buying the adjustments we saw from him later on in the season?
Yeah, I think the one thing that I always like to focus on is when a player is aware of where things are going wrong for him. Because we can, his cutter's not as good. Well, if he's throwing the cutter the same way and it's just not working the same way, then, that becomes difficult to fix. But in Corbin Burnes' case, he's talked about how he had a really bad August and everything kind of came to a head where he said, my cutter kind of turned into a bad four-seamer. He used more colorful language at the time, but that was the gist of it. And he said, I didn't worry about it because I was still getting guys out. And then August happened and he got crushed. He had an ERA, I think, over 6 in the month of August. It was really bad. And he put in the work to reorient the cutter, get the movement profile back, got a little velocity back. It looked more like it did pre-2023. And the whiff rate in the month of September was 27%, which was right where he was in 2022 when he had I think a 30% strikeout rate. Did he win the Cy Young in 2022 or was it? I think it was 2021 he won the Cy Young, but was one of the best pitchers in baseball. I'm not necessarily saying he's like all the way back. I don't necessarily want to bet on a 30-year-old bouncing all the way back to their peak, but we saw enough signs there in September that I can go ahead and look at Corbin Burnes and say, I know the floor is super high. Now there's the path to a high ceiling as well. Maybe 220 strikeouts instead of, 190-ish like he had last year. Good ratios. I think all of that is pretty easy to project from Corbin Burnes.
Your SP 6 through 10, you have Chris Sale, Cole Reagans, Garrett Crochet, George Kirby, and Dylan Cease. And Crochet, a polarizing pitcher all offseason. He was, on a per inning basis, maybe the best pitcher in all of baseball, but there are questions. What team is he going to be on next season? And how does his arm respond going from 25 total innings in 2023 all the way up to 146 this past season?
I mean, look, starting pitcher is a position defined by unpredictability and unprojectability. I don't know if that's a word, but we'll just say it is. And I think that's as true or more true this year than ever when you look at the position as a whole. There are just a ton of guys, and we'll talk about a few more of them who just, you look at them and it's like, I don't really know what to think. Like I could see Garrett Crochet being a top 3. In terms of just talent, I think he might be number 3. I think it might be Skeens, Skubal, and Crochet in some order, based on what he showed last year. Best K- walk rate in baseball, best Sierra in baseball, good quality of contact metrics, elite swinging strikes on his multiple pitches, including his cutter. I just don't know. Like he's never thrown anywhere close to as many innings as he did last season. And he faded in the second half. He had a 4 ERA after the All-Star or after July 1st, I believe. I don't know what to make of that, right? Like it was the most odd circumstances a starting pitcher at the major league level has maybe ever had to deal with. Has this huge breakout in the first 3 months on the worst team in baseball, thinks he's going to get traded, has the demands about a long-term contract. If he does get traded, the White Sox don't trade him, but they limit him to 4 innings or less in every one of his final starts in the month of July, August, and September. Pitching on an uncompetitive team, pitching in that scenario. How much of that is just like it's hard to stay 100% focused? That won't be an issue in 2025. He's going to be, at minimum, he's going to be on a team that projects to win 35, 40 more games than the White Sox did last year. So I don't worry about wins. I don't really worry about talent. I have a lot of questions about injuries. I have a lot of questions about how he's going to just bounce back from that, but I'll bet on the talent here for a guy who's not currently injured, at least.
All right, your SP 11 through 15, you have Garrett Cole, Framber Valdez, Michael King, Pablo Lopez, and Yoshinobu Yamamoto. And Pablo Lopez is a name that you're actually higher than Scott on. You have at 14, Scott has at SP 19. The underlying skills still look very good for Pablo Lopez, but he also has a 3.87 ERA since coming over to the Twins. So at this point, it almost feels like that's the expectation with Pablo Lopez, is that he will have a higher ERA and maybe a little bit of a higher whip than you'd like.
Yeah, and that's a reasonable argument to moving him down to more like an SP, a lower end SP2 than where I have him, which is a higher end SP2. I think one just philosophical gap between Scott and I this year, when you look at our rankings, is I think Scott cares way less about projecting workload. I think he's just ranking talent. And that might be the right way to go at a position where nobody's projectable as far as workload goes, because everybody gets hurt. I can see the case for it, but Lopez feels to me like one of the, 5 most projectable in terms of volume, in terms of the number of strikeouts you're going to get, in terms of the number of starts you're going to get out of him. There are going to be bad starts in there. Maybe he's more like the new age Aaron Nola, where he's not quite an ace, but like 80% of the time he is. And that might still be worth drafting this high. I could very easily be talked into moving Pablo Lopez down, but at a position where there are so many question marks, he's not one.
Let's talk about one more question mark. SP 16 through 20, you have Luis Castillo, Shota Imanaga, Blake Snell, Jacob deGrom, and Aaron Nola.
Only one question mark in there?
There's lots of question marks. Jacob deGrom, I have no idea. I mean, he made his return from Tommy John surgery late last season. He should be ready to go on opening day. Still seems electric. I mean, he got a bunch of whiffs in his, very small sample size. He also has not thrown more than 92 innings since 2019. So, how did you decide where to put Jacob deGrom?
I put a blindfold on.
Some darts at the wall?
I did an Excel function, just equals random.
There you go.
I don't know if that's actually a function in Excel, but let's say it is. I don't know. This is how I feel about Jacob deGrom. Like, his velocity was down last year. Was that because he cannot throw 99 miles an hour anymore? Or is it a conscious effort to put less strain on his elbow? I don't know. I don't know if Jacob deGrom knows. It's wholly unknowable. I think when Jacob deGrom is on a mound, he will be one of the best pitchers in baseball. Maybe the best pitcher in baseball. I don't know if that's going to be 170 innings. That's possible. I don't know if it's going to be 170 pitches. It's just a wholly unknowable. The upside is he's by far the best pitcher in fantasy baseball. If he makes 160 innings, that might be enough for Jacob deGrom to be the best pitcher in fantasy baseball based on what we've seen the past 7 seasons when he's been healthy. He might not make it out of spring training. I genuinely have no idea. And it's not one where I can look at it and say, well, if he's good in spring training, I'll rank it. It's not a question of whether Jacob deGrom's good right now. It's a question of how long he can stay on the mound. This is very much splitting the difference. Probably being on the optimistic end of splitting the difference. That being said, his ADP is the SP8 right now, so I'm not being optimistic on Jacob deGrom, I guess. I have no idea what to do with him. All I know is if he's going to be the number 8 SP drafted in most drafts, there's no world in which I have Jacob deGrom on my team.
And same could be said for me, Chris. I think the entire podcast, the way that Jacob deGrom is being ranked by you and Scott, and I haven't ranked yet, but I probably will have deGrom somewhere around here. We're not going to be drafting him if this ADP remains. For more extensive fantasy baseball coverage, listen to the Fantasy Baseball Today podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Thanks for listening to Fantasy Baseball Today in 5, and we will be back again next week. Bye-bye.